Hi friends, today I want to tell you another chilling story. In the summer of 1984, John Ruetten met Sherri Rasmussen, a notably intelligent young woman at just 16 years old. She enrolled in LMA University to pursue a nursing degree. Their meeting sparked an immediate connection. John had recently graduated from UCLA, while Sherri held a prominent position as the director of nursing at Glendale Adventist Medical Center. They married in November 1985 and were excited to begin their life together in Van, California on February 24th. John left for work at a nearby engineering company that morning. Sherri decided to sleep in longer than usual. Normally, she would have left for work before John, but that day she had considered calling in sick due to an upcoming conference she wasn't looking forward to. She informed John of her plans to decide after sleeping in. John started his workday just before 8 a.m. and later tried to contact Sherri to see if she had gone to work. Initially, her lack of response didn't concern him much. She might have been caught up at work or decided to take the day off for errands after several hours of unsuccessful attempts to contact her. John reached out to her workplace only to learn she hadn't shown up throughout the day. He continued trying to reach her without success. After finishing work, he ran some errands, including picking up dry cleaning before returning home on arrival. He noticed the garage door was open, which was unusual as neither of them typically left it that way. Sherri's BMW was also missing. Initially assuming she was out running errands and had forgotten to close the garage, he became concerned when he saw broken glass on the ground, a clear sign that something was amiss upon entering the condominium. John was confronted with a chilling sight. Sherri, just 29 years old, lay on the floor with evident signs of violence on her face, still dressed in her bathrobe. Overcome with desperation, he reached out to touch her, hoping against hope for any sign of life. But her skin was cold to the touch. In that harrowing moment, he realized Sherri was gone. With a sense of urgency, he dialed 911 for assistance when police arrived. They initially think this must be some kind of robbery gone wrong. They discovered clear indications of a struggle. Strangely, there were no signs of forced entry, and despite the disorder in the living room, where items were scattered, the usual signs of a burglary were absent. The room was chaotic with a broken vase and toppled stereo speakers. Curiously, a VCR and a CD player were positioned on the staircase as though someone intended to take them, but didn't follow through, with drops of blood visible on the CD player. Apart from the car, the only item missing from the scene that gave investigators cause for concern was the couple's marriage license upstairs. They discovered the sliding glass door had been shattered, matching the glass. Shards found on the garage floor by John police were drawn to a quilted blanket hanging over a chair, which upon closer examination revealed a bullet hole. Upon further inspection, law enforcement made a troubling discovery. Sherri had sustained 3 gunshot wounds to her chest. It appeared she was shot once, and then the assailant placed the gun directly against her chest to fire 2 more times, using the blanket to muffle the gunshots. 2 bullets of .38 caliber were recovered from Sherri's body. Each of these shots would have been lethal within a very short time frame. It was clear someone intended to ensure her death. In addition to injuries on her face, likely caused by a vase blow, there was a concerning bite mark on her inner left forearm. The police took a swab for evidence. Initially, police suspected John Ruetten, but he had a strong alibi. He was at work during the time of the murder which was corroborated by his colleagues. Despite this, investigators delved deeper into John and Sherri's personal history in search of clues. They discovered that when John first met Sherri, he was involved with another woman. However, upon meeting Sherri, he declared, "This is the one for me," and purportedly ended the previous relationship. They became engaged the following year and married with their relationship report. Ed Lai being very happy as the investigation continued. Details emerged that before meeting Sherri in 1978, John had attended UCLA and studied engineering, where he had a classmate named Stephanie Lazarus. She lived just down the hall from him in the same dormitory, and John and Stephanie began an intermittent romantic relationship for John. This relationship was casual, but for Stephanie, it meant much more. She was deeply in love with JN, viewing their relationship as serious. They continued their casual involvement throughout college until they graduated afterward. John started a new chapter working for a hard drive manufacturer, while Stephanie embarked on her career as a patrol officer with the Los Angeles Police Department. During this period, John dated other women, which bothered Stephanie immensely. She felt jealous and monitored his activities closely, unable to comprehend why John didn't reciprocate her feelings. When John became involved with a beautiful blonde named Sherri Rasmussen, this created a significant issue for Stephanie. Stephanie was unaware of how serious JN and Sherri had become until she threw John a surprise party for his 25th birthday. It was then that John revealed to Stephanie that he was deeply infatuated with Sherri and believed she could be the one. This news devastated Stephanie, who had hoped for a different outcome over time, despite her wishes. John and Sherri's relationship only grew stronger, progressing from dating to moving in together. Their love was undeniable. Stephanie, however, started inserting herself more into John and Sherri's life, often showing up unannounced at their home and seeking John's assistance with various matters. On one occasion, she arrived at their place dressed to impress in a tight workout outfit, even bringing her skis and requesting John to wax them. Despite Sherri's reasonable request for John to decline Stephanie's requests, John agreed to help Stephanie. This situation made Sher wonder if there was a relationship between John and Stephanie. She asked John about this, and he replied that everything was over between them and that they were just friends. Sherri believed John's words. As time passed, John eventually proposed to Sherri when Stephanie heard about their engagement. Things took a dramatic turn. Stephanie urgently called JN and insisted they meet at her condo to discuss the situation. John agreed and went over during their conversation. Stephanie poured out her feelings, telling John that she needed him, that he was the one she wanted to be with. She asked him to end things with Sherri because she loved him and wanted a future together. In response, John slept with her, claiming it was to provide closure and help her move on after John confessed to Sherri about sleeping with Stephanie. He begged for forgiveness and reassured Sherri of his love and commitment to marry her despite the betrayal. Sherri chose to forgive John, and they decided to move forward with their relationship and wedding plans. They agreed that John must sever all ties with Stephanie for good. However, after John and Sherri got married, Stephanie began stalking Sherri. She showed up unexpectedly at the hospital where Sherri worked, insisting that her relationship with John was not over and making ominous threats, like, "If I can't have JN, no one will." Stephanie escalated her behavior by repeatedly calling Sherri day and night, only to hang up when Sherri answered. On one occasion, Sherri returned home to find Stephanie waiting outside her door, dressed in her full police uniform, clearly attempting to intimidate her. Sherri expressed deep fear to John, her friends and family about Stephanie Lazarus's intimidation. She pleaded with John to confront Stephanie and insist that she cease all contact, hoping he would protect her from Stephanie's threats, despite Sherri's urgent pleas. John dismissed her concerns, advising her to ignore Stephanie and remain calm in the days leading up to her tragic death. Sherri confided in her father about being followed and stalked. She noticed someone tailing her during her commutes to and from work, describing the individual as possibly female, but disguised as a man, despite Sherri's father reporting her concerns to the police. His efforts to get help were fruitless, as the report was disregarded. A couple of days after Sherri's tragic murder, another woman reported a burglary in her condo a few blocks away. She recounted that two men had broken in and stolen her stereo, and when she confronted them, one of the men brandished a gun. Prompting her to flee. Upon hearing this, the police began to consider a connection to Sherri's case due to the similarities in circumstances. The suspects in the nearby burglary were described as two Latino men, and police released sketches to the public in relation to Sherri's murder. Despite efforts, the suspects were never located. 10 days later, Sherri's car was discovered several miles from her condo, with the keys still inside. However, no conclusive evidence was found inside the vehicle, and nothing appeared to have been taken from it, leading investigators to another dead end. Despite the police focusing on the theory of a robbery gone wrong, Sherri Rasmussen's family remained steadfast in their belief that her murder was not a random burglary. The Rasmussen family repeatedly urged the police to investigate Stephanie Lazarus as a suspect in Sherri's murder. They emphasized that Stephanie had been stalking Sherri, harbored jealousy towards her, and had made threats. Stephanie's behavior, including showing up at Sherri's workplace and home, was seen as dangerous. She had even allegedly told Sherri that if she couldn't have John, no one else could. Despite these clear warnings, the police did not consider her a suspect in Sherri's murder. On March 9, 1986, Stephanie Lazarus reported the Santa Monica Police Department that her standard issue LAPD .38 caliber revolver stolen shortly after Sherri's murder. Yet investigators did not initially link this to the case. Months went by without any arrests or progress, leaving Sherri's parents frustrated and desperate for justice. They offered rewards for information and spoke out in interviews expressing disappointment with the LAPD's handling of the investigation. Sherri's family had hoped John would assist in their quest for justice, but he moved out of the condo and eventually left Los Angeles altogether, citing his distress over Sherri's murder. Years have passed, and the case gradually grew colder as the police department focused on new murder investigations. Over the years, Stephanie Lazarus steadily climbed the ranks within the LAPD, eventually achieving the rank of detective and even establishing her own private investigation firm named Unique Investigation alongside her police duties. She served as a training officer, returning to her former junior high school to educate young people on making positive life choices. Stephanie also actively supported initiatives such as fundraising for reliable childcare services for fellow officers working around the clock. After more than 2 decades with the LAPD, Stephanie was promoted to the prestigious art theft detail, where she specialized in tracking stolen in art and art forgeries. Demonstrating her expertise in high-profile cases, she married another LAPD detective, and the couple adopted a daughter, solidifying her personal happiness alongside her professional success. By 2004, Stephanie had earned a reputation as a highly respected officer in Los Angeles. Her colleagues praised her for her professionalism, noting her flawless disciplinary record throughout her career. The breakthrough in Sherri Rasmussen's cold case came when LAPD criminalist Jennifer Butterworth examined forensic evidence and made a significant discovery: saliva found at the crime scene matched that of an unknown female. This finding aligned with earlier reports from Sherri's family that she had been stalked by a woman prior to her death. However, despite this crucial evidence, LAPD persisted in maintaining their initial theory that the case was a robbery gone wrong, and they were reluctant to consider alternative explanations. It wasn't until 2009 when detectives Jim Noodle and Pete Barrar began reviewing cold cases that new momentum emerged in Sherri's murder investigation. They thoroughly examined the case files and were struck by the DNA evidence pointing towards a female suspect. Furthermore, they found the burglary theory lacked credibility for several reasons, prompting them to reevaluate the entire case with fresh eyes. Firstly, only Sherri's car and her marriage certificate were taken, while valuable items like her jewelry were left untouched. And in plain sight, this suggested that the motive wasn't theft, as a typical burglar would have taken more items. Secondly, the crime occurred during daylight hours in a gated community, with close neighbors, making it a risky location for a burglary. This environment would have made it easy for any intruder to be seen or identified, further undermining the robbery theory. Based on these observations, and the DNA evidence pointing to a female suspect, Newell and Barrar concluded that the crime scene was likely staged to look like a robbery. They theorized that the perpetrator either had access to a key or had picked the lock entering the condo with the specific intent to harm and kill Sherri, rather than to steal valuables. Detectives Jim Nuttall and Pete Barrar delved into Sherri Rasmussen's case, methodically starting from the beginning and meticulously reviewing all reports and evidence throughout their examination. One name kept resurfacing. Stephanie Lazarus, noted as the ex-girlfriend of John Sher's husband, recognizing the significance of this connection. Natal and Barber knew they had to speak with John to gather more information. Upon contacting John Retton, the cold case squad inquired if he knew of any women who might have had a motive to harm Sherri. John immediately mentioned Stephanie Lazarus, revealing that she was a police officer. This revelation prompted LAPD to launch a discreet investigation into Stephanie that spanned several months. They kept the investigation tightly under wraps to avoid tipping off Stephanie and to ensure she remained unsuspecting. And off-guard, maintaining secrecy was crucial as they sought to gather evidence without alerting Stephanie to their scrutiny of Sher's case, adding to the intrigue. Stephanie Lazarus's office happened to be located directly across the hallway from the cold case squad, a detail that underscored nature of their covert operation within LAPD headquarters. They encountered her regularly in the hallways and shared coffee breaks with her, all the while building their case against her for Sherri Rasmussen's murder. Despite this proximity, the detectives operated with utmost stealth and discretion. Their primary objective was to obtain Stephanie's DNA for comparison with the sample from the bite mark found at the crime scene. This required careful planning and patience. Eventually, their opportunity came when Stephanie discarded a cup she had used. Seizing the moment they retrieved, the cup tested the DNA and confirmed it matched the saliva from the crime scene. With this crucial evidence in hand, Stephanie Lazarus swiftly became the sole focus of the investigation into Sherri's murder on June 5, 2009, 23 years after the crime. Stephanie was lured into a meeting under the guise of advising on a case. However, it was a pretext to initiate her interrogation, given her status as a fellow officer. The detectives meticulously prepared for this pivotal moment, knowing they needed to handle the interrogation with utmost care and thoroughness. The detectives handling Stephanie Lazarus knew they were dealing with a seasoned investigator who was adept at handling interrogations herself. Their strategy was to start the conversation in a casual and friendly manner, aiming to lower Stephanie's defenses and put her at ease. Initially, Stephanie was brought into an interview room, a move that immediately signaled to her that something serious was afoot. Initially defensive, she questioned why they had brought her into an interrogation room under the guise of a consultation. However, the detective IV had strategically chosen this setting to ensure Stephanie was unarmed in an interrogation room. She would have to surrender her weapon upon entry. Moreover, they wanted to avoid conducting the conversation in a public area where their interaction could attract unwanted attention and speculation from others. Detectives began asking Stephanie questions about Sherri's murder. At first, they simply said that they needed to ask her some questions about an old case involving her ex-boyfriend. Over the course of an hour, they gradually led the dialogue to discuss the murder itself. But Stephanie said that she barely remembered Sherri because it was all so long ago. Detectives later said they had obtained the killer's DNA and asked Stephanie to prepare a DNA sample for comparison. At this point, she immediately stated that she did not intend to donate her DNA, refused further negotiations without a lawyer, and refused the agreement the detectives let her go. But several handcuffed police officers were already waiting for Stephanie at the end of the hallway. The LAPD had finally apprehended Sherri Rasmussen's killer, and shockingly, it turned out to be one of their own officers. This revelation validated the long-held beliefs of the Rasmussen family, who had persistently asserted that Stephanie was responsible for Sherri's murder, despite not having DNA technology available in 1986. Crucial clues, such as the bite mark and reports of Stephanie's stalking and threats against Sherri, were present if authorities had taken these warnings seriously and investigated more diligently. They might have uncovered Stephanie's guilt. Much earlier on, during the investigation of Stephanie's residence, detectives examined her diaries. In one entry, she lamented, "I learned that John is getting married. I felt deeply depressed." The diaries also contained numerous photos of JN. Investigators determined that Stephanie was absent from work from February 21st to the 24th and resumed work on the 25th. No one reported observing any injuries on her during that time. Stephanie Lazarus's trial began on February 6, 2012, lasting 3 weeks. Prosecutors argued that Stephanie harbored intense jealousy toward Sherri due to her relationship and marriage with JN, leading her to enter Sherri's condo that day with the intent to kill her. Investigators believed Stephanie disposed of the murder weapon and staged a car break-in to mislead authorities. They portrayed Stephanie as a narcissistic and obsessed killer who utilized her police training to orchestrate a scenario resembling a failed robbery. A pivotal moment in the trial was John Retton's emotional testimony, during which he recounted his courtship with Sherri, expressing deep remorse over his involvement with Stephanie while engaged to Sherri, calling it a mistake. Ultimately, Stephanie Lazarus, then 52 years old, was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. She is currently incarcerated at the California Institution for Women in Corona with a possibility of parole in 2034. The case turned decisively on DNA evidence from a bite mark Stephanie left on Sherri Rasmussen, which conclusively linked her to the crime scene. This DNA evidence was crucial in proving Stephanie's guilt beyond doubt. Finally, after decades of waiting, the Rasmussen family received the justice they had long sought. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you can be the first to hear about such real-life stories.